I am Elizabeth, 35 years old, and when night lubricated the edges of the city, I transformed plans into movements. Marcus had handed me a map of transactions and names, but maps are only useful if you have a route and the courage to take it. I began by assembling people whose bravery had been polished by survival rather than headlines. A forensic accountant who ate numbers. For breakfast, a former reporter who smelled stories and receipts, and a young paralegal who could memorize depositions like lullabies. We met in a rented room above a laundromat, fluorescent light humming like a distant jury, and I watched them become instruments tuned to a frequency I had cultivated for years. The accountant found irregular ledgers where profits were siphoned through phantoms. The reporter found context in margins, and the paralegal untangled calendars into paths. I ran lists, cross-checked payments, and converted rumor into timelines. Each discovery felt less like revelation and more like recovery, as if we were exhuming promises that had been buried in polite ink. We worked in sequences. Identify vulnerable chords in the stain of bright lines fabric, isolate them, and then pluck until the whole weave unraveled. Each small breakthrough felt like releasing air from a balloon. The initial sigh, then the gradual collapse. Our tools were simple but precise subpoenas, drafted with a surgeon's touch. FOIA requests shaped to pry doors ajar, carefully timed leaks to a trusted editor, and the legal scaffolding that made allegations hard to ignore. We rehearsed narrative arcs. Javier would pitch, the visuals a camera, would need to make a pulse in the public eye. The emotional beats that would make people care not just for numbers but for flesh. When I closed my eyes, I could see my brother, alive in footage, his hands tracing chords on a guitar, his laugh like an unlocked gate. And that image warmed strategy into something with blood. The week we decided to act, Hale hosted a gala to unveil a new scholarship fund, his name sewn onto a banner like a hero on currency. He loved applause and built stages where applause could be purchased. We infiltrated the guest list, arranged a technical glitch during his speech, and prepared a pre-taped segment that masked an interview with a supposed beneficiary. The beneficiary was an actress with a face shaped by loss. She spoke about gratitude until Javier cut to a screen showing receipts, proving the beneficiary never existed. The room went from comfortable warmth to a thin wind of suspicion. Hale smiled as if wind could be bought, and then paused when the images played, and the receipts scrolled across the screen, visible to everyone. Security scanned the audience like a net, hoping for fish. But Javier had already planted versions of the story with other outlets. The narrative moved faster than Hale could purchase responses. I watched his composure chip along the edges. Vanity cracks harder than steel when challenged where it gleams. After the gala, we pushed petitions, targeted information, requests, and a discreet legal complaint that forced an internal audit no one expected to survive the light. The audit was procedural in name but accusatory in teeth. Documents emerged matching Marcus's words with the quiet violence of arithmetic, contractual. Footnotes referenced shell companies, registered in tax havens, grant applications, listed hospitals with no addresses, and payments were routed through consultants who had never seen clocks. I filed emergency motions, coordinated interviews, and made sure whistleblowers had legal protection before stepping into public view. Marcus's testimony became the spine, Dara's forensic reports the ribs, and Javier's storytelling the skin that made the shape of scandal visible to those who would otherwise look away. Each city we contacted demanded proof. Proof arrived in boxes and pixels, in emails recovered from archived servers, and in bank statements that told stories without words. We staged a discreet meeting with a mid-level, Brightline executive who believed in retirement more than empire. He provided timestamps, internal memos, and access to a server path not yet scrubbed. With that path, we traced funds through jurisdictions and found names connecting firms to politicians who had signed letters praising Hale's philanthropy. Those letters became evidence that influence had been purchased the way others purchase: cold cheap, necessary, and dirty. Once the press smelled the trail, editors, who had been wary because of Hale's legal team, became hungry. Fear is expensive, and editors assess risk and reward, and we made the reward irresistible. We released a dossier to 3 trusted outlets simultaneously and coordinated legal filings to follow within hours. The aim was to create a pressure valve too hot for any one entity to control. Hale hired crisis consultants who promised narrative management, but narrative cannot survive when ledgers bleed the truth. His defenders whispered about coincidences and misinterpretations, but coincidences rarely produce identical bank transfers across continents. As accusations mounted, we also shielded human elements. My brother's name reappeared in documents as a beneficiary of small payments that matched the time he recorded his first demos. Those payments had been used to justify contracts that ensnared him. Showing that pattern to a judge was the hinge that could open the lock on his disappearance. To do this without destroying more lives, I set parameters: no vigilante justice, no public shaming of bystanders, and carefully vetted communication that targeted perpetrators, not everyone connected by geography. Our strategy was surgical, not theatrical. Revenge disguised as justice sometimes looks like patience and lawyers, and that is precisely what this was. People asked if I ever felt guilt for the games I played. Yes, I felt the weight of instruments tuned to harm, but I also carried the weight of a family, hollowed by silence. I learned to sleep in short bursts and dream in steps, each step prepared for the next. Every victory was a slow stitch, and every stitch came with a price: exposure, risk, and the knowledge that even good outcomes leave marks. Yet the marks were preferable to the blankness my brother had been handed. We tightened our net until the first arrests were possible, and when they came, they were performed by agents who read our evidence and nodded as if files had become weapons against impunity. Public statements followed. Hale's board demanded explanations, and his partners began distancing themselves in carefully worded press releases. Those releases read like obituaries for reputations. The words are tidy, but the consequences ripple. I watched with an odd mixture of triumph and hollowness, knowing that each name struck from an embezzlement roster was also a person who would now have to answer. My brother's guitar strings seemed to hum in the back of my mind as if music remembered. Him and tones law could not replicate. I lined up the moves like a surgeon aligning veins, each incision measured to stop the bleeding and reveal what had been kept behind clean hands, proving that secrets cannot outlast truth.